Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 142 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to go over a couple listener-submitted Q&As. So we had a couple emails come through this last week that were really good questions. I thought were going to make fantastic topics because these are common things that we talk about here all the time on the phone in the shooting school. Really good information. We're also going to talk about barrel coolers. This has been a subject that's come up. We designed our own and got some emails asked about some YouTube videos we put up about, what we use and how and why. And we learned a lot over a couple years of the shooting school. And then we also want to say thanks at the end to some of our new Wolfpack Patreons. So we really appreciate all of those that are helping out. So ought to be a great podcast. I have Richard with me here again today. So without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I do want to say a quick thank you to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They make them for all kinds of makes and models, and we use them here because they are A, quality, B, safe, and 3, end user adjustable. So we sell our rifle kits here that the customer can opt to install his own trigger, and I think a lot of customers are often stunned on just how easy they are to install and how easy they are to adjust. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, upgrade your trigger, and you can stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com, and look for yours today. We'd also like to thank Wolf Precision's online long-range shooting school, where you can attend a world-class long-range shooting school from the convenience and comfort of your own home. So if you want to learn more information about, or if you're interested in long-range shooting and becoming a better marksman, stop over to wolfprecision.net and check out our online long-range shooting school today. All right, well, good morning there, Mr. Richard.
Morning, Jamie. How are you today?
Heavily caffeinated.
I wish. I had a busy day yesterday running around, so I'm a little not quite awake yet, I think.
Richard is remodeling a house.
Richard is remodeling a house on his own, and we're getting down to the final bit, so I'm trying to get it on the market for April 1st. And I have worked, and this is not unusual, I'm sure, for a lot of people, but I'm supposed to be retired, and I have worked every single day now. What month is it? February.
Yeah.
So for the last 2.5 months, every single day, weekends included, I've put in probably at least 7 hours, I'll say, not 10 hours a day, but I mean, I'm putting in, like yesterday, I was over there for 7-8 hours and putting a kitchen in. So it's like,
and it's constant runs to Lowe's.
Oh yeah, Lowe's is like the manager at my local Lowe's. When I see her, she greets me now.
You're on a first name basis.
Yeah.
So we had a couple really great listener submitted questions, and the first one's I think is a great question. He had said later in life, and his name is Kevin W. So, Kevin, if you're listening to the podcast here, you send us an email for both you guys and give us your email address as well as your mailing address. We're going to send you a hat or T-shirt of our way of saying thanks for submitting the question. But Kevin W. had asked 2 questions, actually. He's a little bit older, law enforcement, shot his whole life, found out, he's left-eye dominant, but shoots right-handed. And he's asking, hey, later in life, where I'm at, should I switch to left-handed? And then there was a follow-up question on some thoughts about when you switch to left hand, that he's struggling with squinting with the left eye to aim. So I'm going to tackle both of those questions, how to really get your eyes to work well with shooting, because staring through optics and spotting scopes and any type of lenses, photographers, videographers, there's techniques to not wearing your eyes out. So Richard, I'll let you take it. Should he switch to shooting left hand at 40, 50 years old if he's left eye dominant? Your opinion. You can have whatever you like.
There's probably a couple of aspects to this, not just the optical side of it, because I think that if you shoot lefty with a right action and you can cycle the bolt with your right hand, I think that's an advantage. But that's a completely different thing.
It can be, and to double down on that, the downside is you have to release your support hand that's holding the rear of the stock. So you get to hold on to the grip and the trigger, but your hand has to come away from the support
That's right.
to work the bolt.
So
you can work it faster.
Double-edged sword, right? So last year at the shooting school, we had a young lad come in, and he was left eye dominant and shooting right-handed. About halfway through the first day, he literally just started shooting left-handed. And I think he ended up shooting left-handed for the rest of the course because he was left-eye dominant and he was shooting better left-handed. But to be honest, it was only marginally better because I think he'd sort of trained himself to shoot shoot right-handed with left-eye dominance. So he overcame the left-eye dominance and being right-handed in his normal daily life. And then when he shot, he actually did shoot better left-handed, left eye than right-handed, right eye. Now, the other thing that this brings into is people who shoot both eyes open and one eye closed. Personally, I'm a both eyes open guy. I always shoot both eyes open, pistol, rifle, archery, anything I'm doing, I'm always both eyes open. And I don't know whether that's just luck, whether it's training because I've always done it, or what it is, but I believe that's an advantage to be able to shoot both eyes open. Now, on my AI setup that I have one of those flip out levels, and we're shooting both eyes open, right-handed. I actually can see this level at the same time as I'm looking through the scope, which is kind of bizarre, but it's great at the same time. I don't have to lift my head off the rifle to see whether I'm level or not, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah. So there's several things Richard brought up here. It's a really good point. So Kevin, if you're listening, the younger lad, as Richard would refer to him, he did.
That's right.
But he had trained himself to shoot right-handed.
Yes.
So he was solid right-handed and was probably uncomfortable switching to left, and that's why maybe only marginally better at first. But I think you're probably going to be more beneficial to go ahead and switch to the left hand. We had a customer here yesterday. The reason we're addressing this here today is he suffered the same thing. Now, he's not left-eye dominant. He's left-handed, but he was taught growing up to shoot right-handed, as a lot of left-hand shooters are. I mean, back years ago when we were younger, it wasn't common to find left-handed rifles on the shelf. They were hard to get. They're expensive. And most parents getting their kids into shooting, they were getting their kids to shoot a right-handed rifle. So I would say switch, yes. It's going to be awkward. The squinting eye thing and the both eyes open, there's two things with that. We spend a lot of time behind spotting scopes. And, we try to tell the shooters, hey, give us a break when you're done shooting, or, hey, I'm off the gun, or like we say, shooter ready. And then when you're done shooting, or if you need a pause, let the spotter know, hey, I need a minute, so they're not standing there staring through the optics for hours, which is what we get stuck doing. But relax and open both your eyes, and that'll help with the squinting, although it's going to be awkward at first. And then eventually you should be able to just not wink, but slightly close your right eye or left eye without having the other one really come down on you. It takes practice, though. Some people wear glasses, and we have them here at the school where the customer will come in and they'll put a piece of tape over one side of their glasses because they can't shoot both eyes open comfortably. So rather than squinting the eye, which they can't do either, they just black out one of the lenses on their glasses. I find that to be like a Band-Aid fix. But I'm with Richard. I'd rather shoot both eyes open. Now, I do close my eyes sometimes if it's really bright out, or if I'm really trying to see a lot of detail around the target. Sometimes I'll focus with the one eye. But most of the shooting, I usually have both eyes open. And like Richard was saying, we put our scope levels on the rail, and they usually set forward. They're not butted right up against our face, so we have to take our eyes off the target and look down. But the beauty of if you set your level up properly is that you can actually see it in the peripheral vision of your opposite or weak side eye.
Right.
And at distance, that makes a difference. When you work the bolt and you crank your rifle over and you do your follow-up shot, I mean, it takes no extra effort. It's there. It's just a little switch in your focus and your level and your shoot again. But if you crank your rifle off cant a little bit on your second shot, it's gone. I mean, It's not going to be a good shot. You might not miss the whole target, but it certainly isn't going to go where it's going to go.
Right. I think the other thing is swapping over from one side to the other is not going to happen overnight. So this is one of those things that I would probably suggest, like every range trip, just, initially spend a couple of minutes, like say, okay, I'm going to shoot, 5 or 6 rounds. I'm going to shoot a couple of rounds into a spot, and then I'm going to shoot some longer distance, and then I'm going to go back to what I normally do. Yeah. And then the next time you go to the range, spend a third of the time shooting left-handed. And the next time you go to the range, spend 2/3 of the time left-handed. And the next time you go to the range, spend all the time left-handed. And don't even shoulder a weapon right-handed ever again. And 100% commit to it. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in this halfway land. And your right-handed shooting is going to deteriorate. And your left-handed shooting isn't going to increase in quality.
That's right.
And, it's going to be really difficult and tedious. But the other good thing is, as we were talking about on the last podcast, you get to go to the range with a training plan, right? You've got an inbuilt training plan of, okay, I'm going to start getting comfortable on the gun with the left side. And, maybe, we shouldn't think of it as weak side. We should just think of it as the other side, right?
Especially if you're left-handed.
It's going to be interesting. And I think that who knows whether we're right or wrong. This is just opinions from Jamie and Richard. But I think that if you have a go at it, let us know how it goes, please, because I'm sure there's a bunch of other people out there who are shooting from their non-dominant eye side, and they'll be interested to see what the outcome is.
And it's going to make you go to the range because now you got a reason to go and practice. And what I find too is in law enforcement and even in the military, they make you shoot strong side, weak side. And I find that I can actually shoot just as good and maybe sometimes a little better. The problem is it takes me 10 times as long, and maybe I shoot a little bit better is because it's so awkward. I'm hyper-focusing on all the fundamentals because it's just so weird. So I feel like I'm walking with 2 left feet, but I find that if I take my time and go through it, I can actually shoot pretty well, but it's just super slow.
Well, you're lucky because I suck at shooting left-handed.
So, and just to follow this up, we've built more left-handed rifles in the last 2 years than we built in the last 5. Combined.
That's good though. That means people are getting what they actually need, right?
Yeah, I mean that. You have the option, and we offer all of the receivers that we sell here. We offer in left hand, and that's actually a big deal. Getting customers the option if they're left-handed shooters and they want to go left hand, they can. I mean, just the numbers are showing it that we are getting either. There's a lot more people born left-handed are coming of age, or left-handers are finally switching over to left-handed rifles. So, but the numbers are there. The other question that we had submitted was from a listener, Dan K. And Dan had 2 questions. First, he was asking about if we could explain driving the rifle, and he had brought up another name and some teachings, and I'm not sure if he's talking about, and I think it's carbine and pistol shooting and how they're talking about driving, the shot. And so he was asking to explain a little bit more about the rifle because when he's shooting barricades and other things, in his email here, he had said that he uses like a jelly grip. He's not really pulling the rifle in, sort of not really gripping or pulling the rifle tight into the shoulder. And so there's a little bit to this, and it's not just a quick answer, but we're going to dive into that. And then he also asked our opinion on people coming from other sports into the long-range shooting game. So specifically like archery, pistol, those type of things. How do they do? What's it look like when they transition and they say, hey, I've shot archery my whole life competitively. I think I'm going to try this long-range thing. So that was the second part of his question. So driving the rifle, and we had mentioned it on podcast before, and there is a podcast called Drive the Rifle. Mm-hmm. So if you go back through, there's a whole half an hour talk about the concept of this. But what would be your response to what he's asking? And I think where maybe he's thinking of how people push a pistol forward or drive a AR-15 pushing it forward compared to what we're talking about using a totally different animal of a bolt-action rifle, what we consider driving the rifle. Or what would be your response to somebody asking that question? And I'll chime in with mine.
The best thing about this podcast is that Jamie keeps me completely unprepared.
That's right. I'm setting him up here.
So, I mean, typically when you're looking at precision rifle, you're either pushing forward into the bipod by a couple of pounds, or you're pulling the stock into your shoulder. I prefer to push into the bipod, but when you get on a barricade, you have to pull the rifle into your shoulder. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you'll be more consistent, I think, because the problem with barricades is that it's a question of balance. And I think that if you push into the barricade, you'll push in with like 10 pounds or 15 pounds, and you'll end up with a different effect on the rifle than you would if you were shooting prone and pushing into a bipod. I think I said that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I think in a barricade, you're better off, getting comfortable and then pulling the rifle into, and I'm actually sitting here.
I was going to say, eventually we're going to be videoing the podcast because you have to see this technique with Richard, the microphone headset, and picturing shooting off a barricade.
Yeah, and I'm actually picturing it, standing there and getting in and pulling my elbows in and pulling the stock into my shoulder, because I think you can control that better to just be a couple of pounds. In the same way that sometimes when you've got your bipod and you're on a pretty slick surface, you can't push into the bipod because it just slides. And in that case, you have to then resort to, pulling the rifle into your shoulder with a couple of pounds. So in terms of driving the rifle, we're driving from the rear, right? So we still need to make sure, if we have enough time, that we set up with good natural point of aim.
Right. And I think now I threw Richard under the bus with this, and I left him. So he's got it right. And so there's techniques taught in all kinds of different sports, and the terminology sometimes can cross, but the meanings might be different. So when we're talking about driving a rifle, and I want to point out here, there's a difference between a marksman and a gamer. There's a difference between a shooter and a competitive arena, because the equipment they use is totally different. Their techniques can vary as well. I always look at it from a shooter's perspective. Like, one of our instructors, Walt, is like a purist. When he goes to a match, he's got a backpack, he's got a sling, bipod, rear bag. He doesn't want to shoot and use anything that he wouldn't use in the field. Now,
he doesn't game it. He just takes what he would normally take to go hunting. Right.
And so the reason that's so important to bring up here is because someone that's going out on a varmint hunting or a hunting trip, the technique of driving a rifle is so important, where when you take a super heavy 6mm or 6BR that weighs 22 pounds, you can jelly grip it, really do a loosey-goosey grip. It's balancing itself on whatever barricade because you're using a game changer bag.
Right.
That's a sport. That's not marksmanship. I mean, it's shooting and it's talent. I don't want to underplay that part, but they get out of they're more, I guess the best way I can describe it, they're more of setup and optimizing equipment and sort of walking the equipment through the process, rather than them having to physically run the rifle without all the external supports, weight, game-changing bag, all of these things. So it's more like shooting management than shooting, because when they run in with two tripods, set one up in the front, one under the rear, two game-changer bags, and the rifle doesn't recoil, they can get away with removing themselves a little bit from driving the rifle. To dive into one more further thing, and I'd really like to encourage you to go back and find the podcast on driving the rifle, because this is a big one. I've watched lots of people at the shooting range suffer with this. What I consider driving the rifle is maintaining control of it, and you have to be really careful with maintaining the control of the rifle. So Richard's, he's pulling the rifle into the rear. We're getting the rifle into our shoulder with a consistent weight and pull. That way we've got control over it. But I think if I wanted to touch on like a really like intimate type of technique, is your aiming point and how you either can destroy the shot, make the shot less than perfect, or run that sucker straight where it's supposed to go by keeping control of the rear of the rifle. I always say that a rifle has a steering wheel, and it's the buttstock.
Right, exactly.
And you have to drive it. You have to have control of it. It's like that guy driving down the road with two fingers on the steering wheel and coffee in his right hand, floating all over the place. Maybe if you're driving a Tesla on autopilot, you can do that, and that would be like a PRS-type competition match where you've got all this gear to help stabilize everything, right? But in a hunting situation or driving a 1972 Ford pickup truck, you're probably going to be all over the road. So same thing with driving the rifle. Like, it's almost very sensitive to it as well. Like, you watch people release the rear grip right when the gun fires. For whatever reason, they just relax, and the rear of the rifle will fall straight down on the bag or drift around on it. I mean, all of this is happening as the gun is firing. And so being very conscious of that is so critical that you're guiding that rifle straight into your shoulder and that you're maintaining control of it and that you're letting it track through the recoil under control.
Right. And the perfect example of this is if you have a stage or you're setting yourself up during practice where you're going to shoot a target that's on the far right and then a target that's on the far left, and maybe there's some targets in between, and you're putting yourself under some time pressure. If you go from the far right target to the far left target, and all you do is basically drive the rifle with the pistol grip and sort of maneuver the rifle over to the other side of the range to take that furthest target, the recoil management has just all gone to pot. Right. And you might hit the target if it's a closer target, but if it's a longer distance target, say over 500 yards, I would say you'd be hard pressed to hit that target.
Yeah.
Because you've completely eliminated whatever normal address you have to the rifle. You've just ruined it all. And you're not really driving the rifle from the rear anymore. You're driving it from the pistol grip.
Yeah, or the front. So a big thing is I call it the windshield wiper blade effect, where they don't move their body at all. They just take the rifle and throw it left, throw it right, and the buttstock's all over the place in the shoulder. And picture like a windshield wiper blade. That's what the rifle looks like, bouncing around. And you're going to get rounds downrange, but they might not all go where you want them to go.
That's exactly right.
The older sniper matches, I'm thinking the NRL stuff might be very similar to what the older ones were. They were awesome because they made you practice these techniques without, Richard, what do you think the average quote-unquote sniper rifle in a sniper match, late 90s, early 2000s, what do you think it weighed, honestly?
Oh, I know what mine was at.
What was it?
I was at like 21 pounds.
Where is it really?
Yeah, because I had that MTU, 26-inch MTU.
Oh, and you had the Schmittenbender 5-pound nail driver.
The Schmittenbender hammer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Wait there. What did I just took that scope off and weighed it. What was it? 42 ounces.
Yeah, it was crazy heavy.
42 ounces for a Schmittenbender with the steel
and it was an
battery
MTU,
rings.
but it was a heavy sucker. Probably heavier than normal. What do you think the average, if you pictured back, like going back to like the old ASC matches where they were field matches, if you looked around the firing line, most of them were like varmint or heavy varmint.
Yeah, and people were shooting M40 style rifles, and probably I'd say probably in the 14, 15 pound
That's
range.
what I was thinking. 14 to 17 pounds was probably average.
Yeah, because it was before the time of the really big whopping scopes. People were shooting 14 power scopes and 16 power scopes and stuff. And
Leupold Mark IV, non-first focal
right.
plane.
You were shooting the Leupold, the 620?
Yeah, 6 to 20.
6 to 20.
Yeah, 6 to 20.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shooting a Night Force before I bought my Schmidt. Probably in the 15-pound range.
Yes. And now
we still grumbled when we walked between stages.
Oh my God, and cried. Oh, some of it, and in some of these matches, you carried all of your equipment for 3 days.
Yeah.
You were really careful in the weight, but so it's a little bit different back then. So when you were transitioning between targets quickly, you had to keep control of the rifle. It wasn't heavy enough, and most of the calibers we shot were 308, 260, 300, so they were much heavier recoiling.
Yeah, it was pretty much 308 and 300 Win Mag and 7 short mag people were into as well, right?
You had to be a better driver than the car.
Yes.
Now the cars are becoming much easier to drive, I would say, but rifles comparatively.
Yeah. But I think they put us into more unpredictable situations as well. I mean, it wasn't like you got a barricade. Like you look at barricades now, all those barricades look the same.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay it that it's easy. They're really under super time constraints, time management, trigger control. All of these things still matter, but they're quite different from the barricades that we used to have to run up 2 flights of steps, shoot out of different windows.
Shoot out of a window, and all that.
Flip a card over,
jazz.
left, right, up, down, in a certain number in Keller order.
Yeah.
It challenged you as not just a shooter, but organization,
right?
Mentally, can they distract you mentally with all these other things that they're throwing at you and still shoot?
And you look at weight differently as well when you're getting older, right? I mean, Jamie and I are not 18 anymore.
No,
and the thoughts of carrying a heavy rifle over any distance, including walking in the fields to go shoot varmints, it's not fun anymore. So now we're looking at, okay, how can we make a rifle that's lighter, that still, we can still get out of it what we want to get out of it.
Yeah.
And that's why we're looking at building now, 11-pound rifles and 10-pound rifles that are still adequately, they're still built in a way that you can manage recoil and take them out to 1,000 yards and be accurate.
And that's where like the 22 Creed and stuff, I've just fallen in love with it, that, you've taken your recoil and eliminated it down to next to nothing, that you can run a really reasonable weight rifle and enjoy the daylights out of it.
Right.
It's not bouncing and jumping all over the place because you made it lighter.
Yes.
And so, dropping that caliber selection. So before we continue on, I do want to say a quick thanks to two more sponsors, and then we got a couple updates. Real quick, we want to say thanks to MDT. MDT is a sponsor of the show, maker of fine chassis. We just released a YouTube video on the JAE 700 they just released. Then Richard was at the range. We got a chance to shoot it together. A really nice video review. It was pretty awesome. So you can stop over to YouTube and see the review. We're pretty excited about the stock. But everything from the HNT 26, we had customers here looking at it yesterday, to Oryx, an unsung hero for a $429 stock.
Absolutely.
To right up to the JE 700. So they make a wide selection of chassis for lots of different makes and models of rifles. And it's a great upgrade, factory or custom, and get one that fits you right. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you want to do it with a chassis, stop over to mdttac.com. It's mdttac.com. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels. A lot of what we do has a lot to do with the quality of the barrels that we use. We've been using Krieger for a really long time. They're a super family business. They've been doing it longer than anybody else. They have a new program at Krieger. It's called Krieger Direct, where you can log on, purchase your barrel, and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. That is fantastic. So if you want a beautiful cut rifle barrel made right here in the United States by one of the oldest barrel makers, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com. So we get questions all the time about customers. Hey, I have this barrel, or I found this one online for, 100. And to be quite honest with you, in the end, our name is on the product, and we can't compromise. Like, there's barrel makers we just won't build on just because it's going to represent Wolf Precision.
Right.
When the barrel leaves us really, really vulnerable to a product.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're trying to build the best.
Yeah.
So you don't want to, go away from that.
At times you can't compromise.
Yep.
I do want to say a quick thanks. We had a couple guys sign up and become part of our Wolfpack Patreon. So I want to say Brandon H. and Frederick D. Thank you so much for signing up for Patreon and being part of our Wolfpack. We really appreciate it. It's $3 a month. It helps us cover a lot of ground here, buy equipment, spend time doing all the editing. And so thank you so much. And we had a new sharpshooter Patreon, which is $20 a month, KCS. Thank you so much for that. And if you sign up at the sharpshooter level, we send you out a nice t-shirt or hat. We certainly do appreciate it. So thank you so much, y'all, for doing that. We really appreciate it. Any updates from you, Richard?
No, there was a couple of great questions. If anybody else has any other questions that you want Richard and Jamie morning drive show to cover.
There we go. It's almost what it's turned into, right? So real quick, though, we get a lot of questions about barrel coolers. And I had a customer come in yesterday, and he looked at the barrel coolers we had sitting out there. He goes, what is that? And I think it really, like when customers come to the school here and we have all these barrel coolers lined up charging, and how few of them have one, and especially shooting suppressed, the value of a barrel cooler and keeping that sucker cool. Because we're doing some testing. So we're going out and putting a lot of rounds through guns, and we're trying to get super high round counts. And how important is a barrel cooler if you want to take care of your rifle there, Mr. Jones?
Well, in terms of taking care of the rifle, the best way to keep anything, that's why we put oil in our car engines, right? Is to help with the thermal management. And so having a method to reduce the temperature and get some cool air through the chamber, through the barrel, and also flush out the suppressor is only going to add life to the rifle. So if you have even if you have an obnoxious caliber that maybe is only renowned to be accurate for 1,000 rounds, I would hazard a guess that if you regularly use the barrel cooler, you'll probably find you'll get 1,200 rounds out of it.
Yeah, easy.
You'll get some increase in accurate life out of a barrel just by, when you take a break, throw the barrel cooler in and get some cool air through that barrel, and you'll add some life to it.
Yeah, and it's the downtime. So here at the school, once we start shooting, the barrels get cooked. And one thing to be cautious of is if you shoot a suppressor, and we did a video, you can stop over to YouTube, we just did a couple-minute video talking about it, because people had asked about this barrel cool they see in some of the videos and here at the school sometimes. We actually designed our own, finding a better way to get more volume of air pushed through the gun faster, and then, of course, using something rechargeable so we weren't throwing away 1, 2, 3 batteries. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, we threw $900 worth of barrel coolers away that are a name brand barrel cooler that's readily available that pushed hardly no air through the gun. So we just said, you know what, we can figure out a better way for a solution for this. But if you shoot suppressed, it's convection and conduction.
Right.
So that suppressor gets hotter than your barrel. It's catching all those gas. It gets so hot, you touch it, you're going to burn the daylights out of yourself. That is sinking heat back to your barrel because it's directly connected, and it's also the hot air, the hot mass that's in there is flowing back through your barrel. So while you think your barrel is cooling, it's actually artificially being held or being raised in temperature because of the suppressor. So if you shoot suppressed, it's doubly important that you get fresh air flushed through the chamber out through the suppressor. You got to get that suppressor cooled down.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, there are more modern suppressor designs that help with the flushing of air through the suppressor. That's one thing to think about when you're buying a new suppressor. But yeah, definitely. I mean, we all have time at the range, downtime at the range, where we can, spend a little time to throw the barrel cooler on and help make that $1,000 barrel last a little bit longer.
Yeah, and it's just a couple minutes. If you have a good barrel cooler, you're going to have to reload. You got to step out, get a drink. That couple minutes just makes a world of difference. Like, it's done a lot of huge help here to the school, extending the barrel life. But people ask how many rounds we got through the suppressors. Suppressors are over a decade old, and some of them have probably over 20,000 rounds.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you look inside, the baffles are still in great shape, and I think it's because we're not cooking them to the extreme end all the time. Like, we're constantly flushing and cooling and flushing and cooling. And so you can stop over. We made the one here out of necessity. We never sold them. And customers started asking, hey, where can I get that? And I was like, we can make you a couple. And so we started making a couple. Now we actually regularly stock them. So if you want one, of course, you can stop over to our website. We finally put them up there for sale.
Yay.
We'll usually keep them here at the school. Customers buy them and take them home after to see how they work. But the importance of a barrel cooler is huge.
Shameless plug for the website.
Yeah, shameless plug for the website. wolfprecision.net. So anyway, Richard, any parting words? Anything you want?
I think you should do it. I think people, if you invest heavily in a custom rifle, ours or anybody else's, I would say, if you want to look after your rifle and get good longevity out of that barrel, because, notwithstanding what we do here at Wolf Precision, even with another company, if you have to change your barrel out, it's a bit of a PIA, right? You've got to send the rifle away if it's somebody else's rifle, or, one way or the other. In these times of high inflation, here's Richard going again, it's a good thing to get an extra 20% out of your barrel. And the barrel cooler is a very low-cost investment to make your barrel last longer.
Yeah, and any
barrel.
Yeah, and any barrel cooler. Just get what you can if you have one locally. And then just a parting thought is, on my end, is we have 5 22 Creedmoor barrels here that were shot all season last year. A lot of them are setting close to the 2,000 round count, and they are all still shooting great.
Oh, we didn't cover one thing with the chap that was asking about going from pistol to rifle.
Oh, the transition.
Yeah. So let me tell the story from last year. We had a couple of guys come into the school last year who were huge pistol shooters and never spent any time shooting rifles. And they went through the first morning of school instruction, and went to the range in the afternoon. And one of the first groups out of the gun from one of these guys that had never shot rifle before was a 3/8 legitimate 3/8 group.
And they shot like that consistently.
And they shot really well through the whole course. So I think that, if you have the shooter mentality and the training mentality, I don't think it's a problem. It's just a matter of mechanics, and then just work through the learning process of fundamentals, and then you'll be good.
It's the rules of the road. That's all they really need. It's amazing how many archery. So the answer is yeah.
That young lady who came through the school last year, she'd been through the school, I think, with her dad. Mm-hmm. Now, she was big into archery before, right?
They're both
big
archers.
She was a great shooter.
She was a fantastic, and a super light
great shooter.
HNT 26 with a 6.5 Creedmoor. Yep. So we're talking a legitimate lightweight hunting rifle. And she was laying whoopings on guys shooting 17, 18-pound rifles. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a good shooter.
You have to do it with fundamentals, for sure. So the answer to the question, yeah. It
Absolutely.
translates over big time. So, well, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us here at the podcast. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Richard, for joining us again. If you would like any more information about the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us. If you have any questions or things you'd like to cover on the show, you can email us anytime. It's contact@Wolf Precision. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, leave a nice comment. It always helps a lot with the rankings. Also, if you know anybody that's into long-range shooting and you don't mind sharing the podcast, we really appreciate it. It helps us a lot with our ratings. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us here at the show. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.